just in a very short meditation in a moment, and then I'll introduce Subhuti and Amalashri for the interview. But we'll begin just by saluting the shrine, so if you want to stand. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Dharmaya.
Namo Dharmaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Namah.
Namo Namah.
Om.
Om.
Hum.
Om.
Okay. So as I said, just for about 10 minutes, we'll do a short settling meditation, and then I'll just say a couple of things to introduce what we're going to be doing for this evening and for the next two evenings as well. So set yourself up so you can sit comfortably for a short meditation. Some space is down here at the front if you like. So just taking a moment to change gears from whatever we've been doing so far today by bringing our awareness into the body. Sensations of contact with the floor and the seat. All the sensations there of warmth or pressure. And allowing the weight of your body to settle down with gravity. And as you let the weight of your body drop down through the base of your spine, this allows the spine itself to rise naturally upwards, up through the crown of the head. Allowing the crown to lift and the chest to be broad. becoming aware of the whole space of the body. All the sensations experienced throughout the body. If you notice any areas of habitual tension, just bringing your awareness into whatever that experience is like. Allowing tension to soften in its own time. And noticing the movement of the breath through the whole of the body, and resting your awareness on that movement of the breath. letting go of any effort to follow the breath, just sitting with a broad awareness. Going to see if there's any last late entries who can join us at this point. And, yes, so we're about to embark on a series of 3 of these early evening sessions that are a real highlight for me, certainly. So Subhuti, who you're is here, who many of you will know, who might have seen talk on our Sangha Day weekend on Saturday, is the alongside leading the team that built the London Buddhist Centre 50 years ago, has also been its first chairman and since then its president. And as president, Subhuti will visit the London Buddhist Centre generally a couple of times a year, and really just be a friend to those of us here, those of us who are taking responsibility at the centre. Subhuti's got a fantastic perspective that he brings to the centre. And also during his visits, welcome if you're just arriving, hopefully you've got the cushions you need. So as along with bringing his perspective and friendship, has also tended to give a series like this one of talks, sometimes in the evening, sometimes at this slot, exploring all sorts of different themes. You've got from the sort of the Yogacara and the workings of consciousness to how we live and work and even sexual relationships, I think was in the last one. So we've got a whole sort of range of themes that Subhuti's been able to cover, and sometimes as talks, and sometimes like these 3 evenings going to be in the form of interviews. So we've got 3 different interviewers, younger practitioners who will be interviewing Subhuti about different aspects of the Dharma. So we'll be exploring under the themes vision, practice and community. So broad themes that will encompass the whole of the Buddhist vision really. So tonight for our first talk, Amalashri will be interviewing Subhuti about vision. So let's welcome them.
Great, thank you so much, Siramanis. And yeah, very good to be here with you, Subhuti. I'm not going to sort of introduce Subhuti again, but I will say that in terms of our personal connection, I've always felt like we have a sort of special fondness between us. But then whenever I speak to other order members, other people in the Sangha, they all seem to think that they have a special connection with Subhuti as well. So I'm sort of forced to concede that I think that's more your ability to...
I have a special fondness for
Yeah, so lots of us have benefited from Subhuti's friendship, and yeah, I'm just really, really looking forward to hearing what you have to say on this theme of vision for the first night. When I first came along to the centre, I think that really what I found was answers to sort of the 3 big questions of my life. I was just graduating from university. I think I was 20 years old, fulfilled. And what I found at the Buddhist Center was what to do with my life, how to do it, and who to do it with. And I think that sort of maps quite well onto the themes for the next couple nights, the vision, the practice, and the community. So yeah, I just want to dive right into vision and start with the first question, Subhuti, for you of why do we need a vision in the first place? We can live pretty sort of comfortable lives nowadays. What is the point of having a sort of inspiring, uplifting direction for our lives?
I think I'd say it was a human necessity. I think to be a human being without some sense of the overall meaning and purpose of one's life in relation to the nature of reality of the universe itself is painful. But we usually manage to carry on chasing, as it were, away from suffering, which dogs our heels all the time, but we don't really face the underlying issue of pain and suffering, which is the lack of meaning. And I think that has become more and more prevalent. And I remember so clearly as a young man, I'm almost a big boy, that the strong sense of absolute necessity of understanding why I was here, what I was supposed to do with this life, and what it all meant. I was brought up as a Christian, but at a certain point I realized that I'd been sort of going along with it, but I had no real connection with it. It was just a formula that I took on. And when I dropped that, these sort of deep questions arose more and more strongly. Particularly impressed, I read an important little essay by Nietzsche on Schopenhauer. It's called Schopenhauer's Educator. And in that essay, he talks about he says something like, what young person does not wake in the night wondering what it's all for. So I think it's not a question that's added to our lives. I think it's implicit in our human consciousness. And without finding an answer to that, I think one will experience suffering. In traditional Buddhist analysis of suffering, suffering is said to exist on three different levels. The level of real pain. You bang your finger with with a hammer, which I've done recently. And then there's the pain of not getting what you want, getting what you don't want. But there's a much deeper level of pain, which is this deep sense of existential unfulfillment. You can be very happy and yet have this deep sense of unfulfillment. And the Buddhist perspective is that everybody has that, but most of us find a way of chasing away from it. We're always 2 steps ahead of pain. Well, not always. Often 2 steps ahead of pain. But all pain ultimately emerges from that deepest pain of not knowing why we're here, what our lives are for. It's utter meaninglessness without that dimension fulfilled.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the book Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah, which is about in concentration camps. A psychotherapist discovered that what helped people to survive the greatest of oppressions and horrors was a sense of meaning.
Yes.
Which is sort of one end of the spectrum, and then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is I work with really wealthy tech founders who are in a bit of a god realm in a sense. They have everything that life can offer at their fingertips, and yet some of them can just be so existentially tortured and not be knowing what to do about it. And either way, it's the meaning that is the answer.
Yeah. I think it's implicit in human consciousness, as I say. Human consciousness necessarily leads us to sense that there should be something more to life. Because we're meaning-making machines, as it were, organisms, sorry. That's part of what we are as human beings. We make meaning. But unless we have a sense of ultimate meaning, all other meanings lapse and fail.
So I want to pick up on this point of we are meaning-making machines, because I think that...
Organisms, let's correct that one before it goes too far, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's quite relevant actually, because I think that nowadays vision in a sense has been commodified, for lack of a better term. I mean, every charity, every business, every individual in a sense can have a vision. I don't know, a vision for my career, a vision for my creative practice, a vision for my business, a mission statement. I work for a social movement where the vision is pretty much everybody in the world living a middle-class lifestyle. So in a sense, a very good mission, like let's uplift people out of poverty, let's live in line with climate boundaries alongside that. But what does the Buddhist vision particularly have to offer? How does it take vision further than that?
Well, it thinks in terms, or rather it teaches in terms of what ultimately this existence is about, which is the gaining of liberation by following the Dhamma path until one achieves a realization, direct realization of what life is. So we resolve the great existential question of what life is about by pursuing our own development, our own evolution, to the point at which we see directly for ourselves. And we do that by taking the Buddha's vision and applying that. So we take his vision, first of all, as a model, so to speak, that we apply to our own experience. But through applying that model to our own experience, we come to have that vision for ourselves. But I think it's the modern situation is one in which meaning has been largely leached from life. And of course, many people do find meaning in various ways. But we have the most effective religion the world has ever known, consumerism, which is calculated to satisfy one's desires. And it's through the satisfaction of desires, even if that satisfaction can never be permanent, that one eludes this underlying sense of dis-ease. One keeps on sort of chasing ahead of it. And yes, it snaps at your heels, but we all live in hope. In the worst sense, if you see what I mean. We think it's going to work out, but it can never work out. You cannot find meaning for existence merely in the conditioned world. You can find some meaning, some fulfillment, some psychological happiness, and so forth, absolutely no doubt. But unless you are living your life in relation to the ultimate nature of things, there's bound to be a deep sense of dissonance and dissatisfaction. And living that life in relation to the ultimate nature of things means growing to the point at which it's not merely an idea, as it were, that you're chasing, or even a feeling that you're chasing. It's something you directly see.
Yeah, so far, that makes a lot of sense. You've sort of emphasized the individual, the vision for an individual's life, so moving towards enlightenment, growing, moving towards freedom. What about the Buddhist vision for what we're trying to do collectively? Is there a vision for that too?
Well, we are again social beings. We're strongly affected by each other, and we're vividly aware of each other. I arrived in London 3 or 4 days ago and travelled on the tube, and I suddenly felt myself sort of, I was going to say captured by, but assaulted by the mood of all around me, as it were. And a lot of it wasn't very good. But you can't, most what we do is the definition of being a Londoner, isn't it? You encase yourself in a sort of shell so that it doesn't get through. It does get through. It gets through very deeply, but we try to sort of numb ourselves to what's going on around us. But you can't, ultimately. I've spent time in solitude, a long period of time in solitude, 8 months in solitude. I've never had so much contact with people because the human consciousness naturally reaches out, and so we're affected by the world around us, by the people around us, and so you cannot live for, as it were, your own sake. You have to be in relation to everybody else, and your pursuit of fulfillment has to take into account other people. So clearly, from a Buddhist point of view, what that means is spreading to others the vision and the means and the community. It means that you try to communicate to as many people as possible what the real meaning of human life is, and how to live it out. And it's only by doing that that really you can yourself find fulfillment.
Yeah, and that's what you very much dedicated your life to.
Well, I've done my best. Not very successfully, but not badly. Yeah.
Well, it's a work in progress, the movement, right?
It's always work in progress,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought maybe that was a good moment if you could say a little bit more about what this Buddhist tradition is specifically trying to do. I guess the Buddhist truths remain the same, but how they are communicated through time and space evolves over time. And what do you think our Buddhist tradition is particularly?
What our tradition, that is
what is
Sri
the
Ratna.
vision for our tradition?
Yes. Well, all of Buddhism throughout the ages and throughout the climes of the world, all of Buddhism is predicated on the capacity of the human being to attain liberation. And it's predicated upon the liberation that the Buddha attained 2,500 years ago in North India. And that's the purpose of every Buddhist tradition. So we are just Buddhists in that sense. We're just trying to ourselves grow in the Dhamma, in the Buddhist teaching. We're trying to move towards that liberation ourselves, and we're trying to bring as many people as we can with us. So in some senses, we're not at all distinctive. But I think that what is distinctive about our teacher, Urgyen Sangharakshita, probably most of you know something of him, but he is the founder of this order and this movement in 1967. He was an Englishman, went to India and practiced there for 20 years, started Buddhist activities there, and then was invited back to work with the nascent Buddhist movement here. And when he came back, he realized what enormous potential there was, that Western culture, to use a very broad and not very precise term, was at a phase when Christianity no longer was the dominant force, certainly in Britain, and at the same time there was a great interest, even might even say hunger, for some new source of meaning. So people like me in the 1960s, we were, hippies and all that, and we were exploring in order to try to find some new meaning. So what Sangharakshita did was connect with us, and in that connection try to give us what we needed, try to respond to us and where we were at, not with some pre-planned formula. He told me once that I asked him about what plan should we have for the future. He said, "Oh, I never plan." He just responded to the needs of individuals and to his own unfolding understanding of the Dhamma in the context of his own culture. So what he's tried to do is go back to the basics of the Dhamma, that is that struggle for human growth towards enlightenment, and to, drawing on the Buddhist tradition, to re-express it in the context of our own times and place. And so that's the distinctive feature of Triratnam. And of course, in the course of doing that, some of the features will be very similar to what you'll find in any other place. Most of the basic teachings are common to all Buddhist traditions. but some of the features will be unique. I mean, one thing that he used to mention was that in the Buddhist tradition there's almost no discussion of friendship. But friendship is a well-explored theme in the West, going back to Aristotle. And it's especially now because of the atomization of society and the isolation that many people experience, friendship becomes a major theme. So he's expressed the Buddhist understanding in terms of the theme of friendship, of deepening friendship. And he himself had a sort of genius for friendship, an incredible capacity to connect with a huge range of people. And probably everybody felt that they were very special in Bante's eyes. So I tried to catch a little bit of that, he was a supreme master of that. The field of beauty is very little explored in the Buddhist tradition. Yes, there's a lot of very considerable art. And I do recommend, for instance, going to the British Museum and looking at the Far Eastern Gallery and going to the Amaravati marbles, which are magnificent high-relief sculptures, absolutely magnificent, of world class. So that was there in Buddhism, an appreciation of Buddhism, of beauty, appreciation of art. Buddhism has always been accompanied by art. There's no theory of art. You get a little bit of it in Japanese Buddhism, but no real theory of art as a way. No, you do get it in Japanese Buddhism in the famous Do, the ways. But elsewhere, no. So very little deep discussion of beauty, which is, after all, the ultimate subject of art, and very little discussion of art as a method of human development towards enlightenment. So that's very important in the Western tradition. In fact, Sangharakshita said that he thought that in Europe, the alternative tradition to Christianity was kept alive from the Greeks through the Romans, and it's this, as it were, sometimes referred to as esoteric tradition, an aesthetic tradition. And he sometimes said that there was more spiritual vitality in the artists than in the bishops. So yes, he's tried to find a way of connecting with this culture. Of course, now it's many cultures, but with this culture in its sort of broad unity, and to find ways of speaking that come from our tradition. That is the traditions of the West, the many traditions of the West, and to speak through them. Very interested. I go to Mexico every year. Poor fellow, it's a terrible hardship. But one of the Mexican order members was saying to me that he'd sort of realised from Bante, our name for Sangharakshita, how important art was, and he wanted to know which art should I look at. Should it be Rembrandt or Leonardo or whatever? He said, look at your own artists. In Mexico, there's some really fine art. Mexico has a very strong tradition of design and art, even going way back to the pre-Columbian period. So draw on that, because it's near to you. So it's one of the most important things he has to say is that the Dhamma can't be grafted onto you. You can't be given a sort of formula that is, you adopt. And I've seen many people who do that. They try to turn themselves into Tibetans. I mean, sometimes to an extent that embarrasses Tibetans. Or you try to turn yourself into a Sri Lankan or Japanese or whatever. You can't do it. You're not. You're whatever you are. And even nowadays, most of us are, as it were, Western in the broadest sense of being, entering the scientific world, the rational world, and so forth. So we have to find within ourselves the psychic life that is the source of our vitality. We have to link that psychic life with the Dhamma, so that it gives us the fuel, the power to move forward towards enlightenment. So those are a few things I could say. Of course, Sangharakshita said that there were 6 distinctive features of the FWBO, or Triratna or other. And of course, having launched upon 6, I can only remember 4. There's always a danger, isn't it, when you use a list and really haven't thought about it in advance. But I won't. I'll tell you what. Look them up for yourself. But yeah, there are certain features that are distinctive to us, like the importance of art, the importance of community, the importance of right livelihood, and so forth, which are quite distinctive, because Buddhism has exclusively grown up until recently in traditional societies, mainly agrarian societies, quite stable on the whole, quite ethnically homogenous on the whole, and it's settled over a long period of time into its own distinctive form. Can't do that anymore. So there has to be a major effort on all our parts to discover the fuel which will drive us towards enlightenment.
Yeah, and that in itself is, in a sense, what vision is, and it needs to be sort of communicated to us in a way that we can understand.
Yes, yeah. You can get an account of the teachings out of a book, but unless you can connect with it, I was going to say emotionally, it's more than emotionally, psychically. This resonance that's set up between the Buddha's teaching and yourself, your own inner being. Unless that happens, it's very difficult to make progress. And many of us find that. We come along inspired in a slightly abstract way, but driven by a real need. And there comes a point when you begin to feel, this doesn't really connect with me. And then you have to start working to find those roots in yourself. I remember a friend of mine saying that at a certain point he realized he'd built the edifice of his spiritual life beside its foundations and his own experience. If you see what I mean, it has to be built on your own experience, but with a openness to something beyond your experience, both expressed in terms of the Dhamma and in terms of individuals.
Yeah, so it sounds kind of like what you're saying is it's like in the West, us Westerners, we come with a sort of psychic infrastructure, and we need the Dharma to be communicated in such a way that we'll be able to take it in. At the same time, because we live in a context with such strong 21st century views that are shaping how we think about the world, I guess we also need to look out for where the Dharma can be diluted and just sort of absorbed into our culture, but in a way that I guess takes away the revolutionary aspect and makes it diluted. And I was wondering if you could say a bit about this and maybe particular areas that we should be careful of.
I want to follow up something else before I come to that, if you'll excuse me. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. I was thinking back to Mexico. Once my mind goes to Mexico, I'm in Mexico. But what I found going there was it's pretty to some extent Mexicanized, but it's still rather English because they learnt in England to begin with, and Mexico has a very rich indigenous culture, very, very rich. It was suppressed in some ways by the conquista, the Spanish, but it remained very much alive, and you see it with Mexican Christianity. It's more like Hinduism than Christianity as I know it from Northern Europe, and what we've been encouraging people to do is to connect with the forces that are there in Mexico, which are much more palpably there than they are in England. They are here in England, but they're much more palpably there. So I just wanted to illustrate that because it's such a clear way of illustrating. A different issue arises in India, where the people we're mainly communicating with have escaped from Hinduism because of the caste system. They've deliberately left Hinduism because their own experience of oppression is embedded in the caste system, which is embedded in the Hindu perspective. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but let me put that as a generalization. So they're cut off from the Indian psyche, if you see what I mean, the imaginative realm of India. And so they have to find their own way back into that without giving in to the oppressive forces which are sort of bound up with that. So we've all got our own task of trying to reach deep into that, those forces within us, in the context of a vision. Mm. So, coming back to your question, yes, every phase of human society has within it certain views. In Buddhism, this is a very important term, drishti, which actually is also the word for vision. So there are certain attitudes, understandings, often not really conscious, which the culture inculcates. For instance, I was born just immediately after the Second World War, and it was a cultural turning point, cultural cusp. And I was brought up initially with the still surviving Old English culture, in which the real meaning of life was getting married, getting a job, having children, and dying. They didn't put it like that. But there's sort of, for instance, the romantic idea that you could find, the ideal man or woman, and that was quite a large extent the meaning of things, and that was still very much alive. The romantic idea was still very much alive as a sort of embedded in the social structure, and then, of course, Christianity was still nominally alive. Certain forms of belief about the country, patriotism, class system, still very much alive in my childhood. So those ideas, they're more than ideas, they're felt. They're in people's guts, which is why you get so much reaction. Why people march and scream and shout and distort what the flag means and so on, because they feel deeply threatened. Something that matters to them is deeply threatened, because these views are clung to as sources of security. And in Buddhism, there's a phenomenon called upadana drishti, which means the clinging to views. We hold on to ideas and attitudes and approaches for dear life. And when they're threatened, we feel deeply threatened. And we may become even violent. So the culture has all these embedded attitudes and views and assumptions. And for instance, the idea that you're kind of owed happiness, which I would say is a modern view, that somehow or other, if you're not getting happiness, somebody's to blame. Then. Coming down on the train, I was in a very crowded carriage, and surrounded, mainly young people going up to London for a bout of Halloween, with some delightful costumes. And insofar as I could understand them, I can no longer understand what Londoners say. The accent, the dialect has changed so much, I can no longer really understand what people say. Of course, some people might say you're deaf as well. But anyway, from what I could understand, the sort of basic idea was that you just pursue pleasure, you pursue happiness, and all the talk was around those things. I must say I found it quite dispiriting. At the same time, I thought, well, what else can they do? Who's telling them anything else? Not bad at all, but it's just we're being broadcast at all the time, and especially by the most efficient religion there's ever been, consumerism, which is consciously working with our susceptibilities. That they hire psychologists to work out how to get us to crave. And they know how long the cycle of satisfaction from craving lasts. They know. I've seen, equations which show that if you launch a new iPhone now, it's not going to work. If you launch it then, it's not going to work because somebody else will come in. But if you launch it then, the pleasure that people get from having a new iPhone has started to diminish, and then the envy of those who have a new one sets in. So we're trapped in these views, some of which are quite superficial. A lot of them are much more subtle, perhaps. There's so many, it's difficult to
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a strong one already, isn't it? This sort of materialist view that means that, the best I can hope for is to bask in sensual pleasure. Yeah,
and because underlying that is a philosophical materialism, the belief that there is only this life, that we are, our consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the body. It's just an accident. People wouldn't exactly affirm that, but that's the way one sort of lives. Yeah. So there are assumptions around us that we cannot help but imbibe. It's fascinating having been around for quite a long time. I've seen all these fashions come and go, even in the movement. Suddenly everybody's talking about this, reading that. And so often these influences are very little related to the Dhamma. They're just sort of an indigenized version, an indigenized version of what's going on out there. And one of the things we really need to do is to soak ourselves in the Dhamma, to read the Dhamma, to study the Dhamma, of course to practice it and reflect upon it in meditation, so that we gain more and more immunity to these viral views. They're viruses of a kind. So yes, we need to be Buddhists, not merely 21st century, beings, as it were.
Yeah. I really like that you you went into consciousness, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that, because I think that is really one of the areas where Buddhism cannot be secularized, actually. I mean, I think that I remember when I first came along, I think that basically what I was being offered by the world, as it were, is in terms of meaning, you can have a career that makes an impact. For yourself, you can have sort of wellness or psychology, and this can sort of be done in this sort of chamber. You can be successful. That's what an overall successful life looks like. And then what Buddhism had to offer was just more. Impact was sort of sublimated into spiritual friendship and the bodhisattva idea, and wellness, and was transcended into, the nature of consciousness itself. So could you say a bit more about those areas?
Well, of course, in many ways, some of those goals are good ones. But the problem is they are not enough. There has to be more. Otherwise, at some level, one is not fulfilled. And I think it's very important to pay attention to that level. There's suttas in which the Buddha presents the whole path in terms of suffering, that you have an experience of dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction, better word than suffering, because it's not necessarily that you're in pain or even not getting what you want. It's something deeper than that. And if you pay attention to that, it becomes the guide of your life. And you do something which gives you a certain level of happiness and so forth. It's not enough. And you see the Buddha's own life in these terms. He's constantly trying to find something that really is enough. So that says that there's something implicit in awareness that demands fulfillment, which can only be provided by transcendence. By transcending, that is, one's identification of awareness with self. I am aware. Well, we do an exercise, the Six Element practice, and you see that there's no I in the body, and you know the different dimensions of the body, and then you see, when you look at consciousness, who is conscious. You can't find anybody who's conscious. It's just an idea that that emerges, as it were, as an object in consciousness, but that is not the subject of consciousness. Consciousness, by definition, if you investigate it closely, cannot be owned. It's just awareness. So awareness itself is free from that identification. As soon as you start to identify consciousness with anything, and all that identification ends up as being about me, as soon as you identify consciousness with anything, you begin to suffer. By definition. You can see why. Because you've got something that is vast, that is infinite, without boundaries, that is naturally radiant, naturally blissful, and you're squeezing it into a tiny compass. So there's a sort of pressure. It can't bear to be confined in that sort of way. And so the nature of consciousness itself demands that one frees consciousness from the restrictions that we impose upon it, which we learn to do from a very early age, and that our culture is giving us new ways of doing it. You know, the whole business of identity, new ways of identifying ourselves, so forth. It's got its positive side, it's got its negative sides. But there are all sorts of new ways of identifying ourselves, things to identify with, even causes, even good causes to identify ourselves with, but which actually limit us. So do you see what I mean? I try to do this myself again and again. Find a cause that could completely contain me, as it were, and they're good causes often, but I'm more than that. And yes, I could do those things, but not as a source of self-identification. I could work for the benefit of others, but not as a means of fulfilling myself, if you see what I mean, or solidifying myself. So that's the issue, that consciousness itself is infinite, limitless. And this is not a mere rhetoric, not New Age rhetoric, as it were. Can be as well, but it's not New Age rhetoric. It's a matter of actual investigation. Have a look at awareness. Don't think I am aware, just look at awareness. Who is it? Very, very difficult to describe awareness, of course, because it's so primary, so fundamental. But it doesn't come, as it were, as a result of something that stands outside it, having it, because our sort of image of consciousness is of somebody who, as it were, carries it around with them like a torch, and something out there, the other side of it, that is illumined. It just isn't factually correct. If you actually look at what an active awareness is like, it doesn't come like that. That duality is something we add to it. Well, kind of necessarily to get your breakfast, but even to get to the centre and gain enlightenment. But if you over-identify with that convenient structure that we impose upon our awareness, then you will suffer. Because you're suffering at the ordinary level, because you cannot get complete satisfaction of all your desires. Can't do it. He or she is never what you want, quite. They're pretty good, but never quite what you want. The new iPad is soon outdated, and you've played with all its tools. Actually, you never play with all its tools because they're capable of sending you to the moon or whatever, but you use a fraction of them. Anyway, you at the sort of ordinary instinctual level, it's impossible to have complete satisfaction. But much more important, at the deeper level of existential level, if you like, a consciousness that is narrowed to an identification cannot but be in pain. It's not pain, it's this unfulfillment, I think is a better word here. This sense of got to be more, got to be more. I remember that so strongly in my youth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the intuition that fulfillment is possible is correct. but
Yes,
it gets
it's an
challenged.
intuition because it's implicit in the nature of awareness, if you see what I mean, which presents itself to you as an intuition. What is it? Bhante says a faith. He talks about faith, which in a way is commensurate with intuition. Is the response of what is ultimate in us to what is ultimate in the universe. So what is ultimate in us, you could say, is unlimited consciousness. What is ultimate in the universe is unlimited consciousness. So there's a sort of natural response between them.
So how does that fit with the sort of, I guess, secular materialist view nowadays that consciousness is a bit of a byproduct of what happens in the brain?
Well, I think there's a great deal of variety of modern views about this, and I think there are many, even neuroscientists, who would not agree with that materialist perspective. I think that it's often said that the deconstruction of the sort of kind of Enlightenment, European Enlightenment view of the universe, which was a mechanistic one, Newton and Leibniz and all of that lot. It was first deconstructed really by Einstein and with quantum mechanics and so forth. For the first time, the universe was not a fixed, stable entity. It was ultimately indeterminable. But that slowly spread through the other sciences, and things I've been reading recently suggest that it's spreading through the neurosciences too. Some of neuroscientists are aware of, probably quite a lot, and particularly those who are interested in Buddhism or active Buddhists, they're aware of the possibility of a state which is, beyond the stimulus response level. So I don't think it's a single picture, but at the common level, the materialism is fairly, unthought. Adopted in an unthought way. Well, if you scratch the surface, many people, certainly in Britain and no doubt other places too, certainly experienced in Mexico, actually believe in other forces. Yeah, I believe that the spiritualist church in Britain is one of the largest. Don't quote me on this. It's very safe to make assertions and then say don't quote me, but. It's one of the largest religious, spiritual movements in Britain, and it's very common. In a number of my friends from a more working class background say that the medium, lived next door, and very common that level of things. But at the sort of official public level, it's not like that.
Yeah, because even in that's a sort of like, would you say animist understanding?
Yeah. Well, I think an animist understanding is essential to the practice of Buddhism. I think if you view the world as dead, well, you are part of the world, and you are therefore dead. And the universe, nature, is in you. So if you don't view the natural world as alive, you are not alive. You don't see yourself as alive. So yes, I think that animism, which is very difficult to revive, and it's not a question of a sort of sentimental pagan revival, but of us discovering the life in the world around us, the life in the natural world around us. Everything is life. Everything is ultimately has consciousness in some form. So without that, it's really difficult to make spiritual progress yourself. And you will see your spiritual practice as essentially about adjustment. And you can see that with a lot of the secularized mindfulness movement, which is not all bad by any means. It's good that people are mindful, at least to some extent. But often it's aimed at adjustment, so that you learn to live better. Great, I wish people would live better. but it's not what mindfulness is ultimately about.
Yeah. It's very interesting just about the animist point, because going back to what we were saying about neuroscience, in a sense, the materialist interpretation of the brain is saying consciousness comes from minerals and fluids in the brain, and an animist might respond to that saying, you mean consciousness comes from water and rocks? Could you say more about animism and how that shows up in Buddhist practice, and how we can bring, I guess, more of that into our practice and our vision?
So the animist, to talk like that, experiences a tree not simply as a botanical specimen, but as containing life, as expressing life, and may even experience an affinity with that life. I've had my own animist moments. I remember once I was on solitary retreat up in the Sierra Nevada in Granada, and at the end of the retreat I had a sudden inspiration, and I wrote a play. Don't worry, I'm not going to inflict it on anyone. But over 3 days it just poured out of me. And at the end I was sort of sitting there feeling completely fulfilled, and I realised that I was experiencing what the trees were experiencing. The trees were fully expressing themselves, just as I'd, at least at that time, fully expressed myself. I'm not going to tell you about my communication with trees under LSD, but and I still believe that was absolutely true. But yes, if we're a bit open to it, if we suspend our disbelief, we will experience nature as alive. The poets, of course, most vividly express this without necessarily talking in direct animist terms. Somebody like Wordsworth, it's obvious that for him the natural world was absolutely alive and speaking. So it's that sense that the natural world is speaking to you, and that you are, in a sense, speaking to it. You don't necessarily have to start believing in nereids and dryads and so forth. Why not, if you want to? But you recognise the world is alive around you. It's very strong if you go on solitary retreat, which is a practice we're encouraged to do. In fact, Bhante used to say for a month every year. And when you're on solitary retreat, because you're withdrawing from the cultural world, as it were, and you're coming down to your raw experience, you're much more vividly aware, for instance, of telepathy. You can sense other people's thoughts, and you're much more aware of the life in the natural world around you. So yes, I strongly encourage people to have that experience. Poetry is a very important entry point for that. And the greatest of the poets are clearly aware of the universe as very much alive and speaking to them. So
Buddhism, a vision of truth and of spiritual growth, and we wake up to a world that is meaningful and alive. And what does that mean? What does Buddhism say in terms of what happens when we die?
Well, the traditional teaching is that consciousness is not a fixed phenomenon. Consciousness is, like everything else, a process. And there's no point at which there is a thing called consciousness. Actually, there's no point at which there's a thing called thing, if you see what I mean. It's all process, ever-changing process. And it can be defined in terms of its interaction with other processes. And these processes arise and then fade away, and something else arises from them. So consciousness is of that kind. It's a process which arises at every moment and then is modified by the experiences in that moment, and then re-arises in a new form. Although it's not really that it arises and then re-arises, there is a constant arising. Its arising is its decay, and its decay is its arising. So that process does not end with death. It is temporarily, as it were, coincided with a number of other processes, physical processes making up the body, and when those break down, because they must break down, everything breaks down, then the stream of consciousness continues. And if that stream of consciousness has not been liberated from identification with the material world, it will remanifest within it. The energy is not discharged. It reignites again and again and again. So one way one could see one's Buddhist life, I certainly see this myself with the great darkness approaching more and more rapidly, getting closer and closer, very vividly aware of that without too much bother. But the process will continue. And it will arise somewhere else. It won't be Subhuti. It probably won't remember that it was Subhuti. It may be male, maybe female, whatever, I don't know. But it will continue. And the efforts that I make now to clarify my consciousness and to deepen my understanding and to intensify my love, that will, to some extent, affect what arises, and something of the efforts that I've made will be passed on, and will, I hope, come back to the London Buddhist Centre and learn to meditate here from.
From me.
Yeah, I hereby appoint you my teacher in the future. Yeah. I'll be back.
Can you say more about that? Because I don't know, maybe some people just think that's, just really magical, but whenever I hear about the endless rounds of rebirth, I just think that's awfully concerning, and I don't know where the world is going, and should we be concerned? What is the Buddhist perspective on this?
What, you mean that if we blow ourselves up, where am I going to come back? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe that's part of it, but also just coming back in and of itself and suffering again and again and again. Yeah. Well,
most of us don't have that feeling very deeply. Of course, in a sense, when you reach a certain point in your spiritual life, you do become deeply disillusioned with this conditioned life. I said the other day, on Saturday, talking to Sangharakshita, it's actually about 6 years before he died, but he told me that he found this life disgusting. That's the word he used, disgusting. And he found nothing appealing in it at all. And he wanted a rest. And it wasn't said in a cynical or depressed way. It was really that he'd seen that the limitations of this conditioned existence. And he said that nonetheless, he'd taken the Bodhisattva vow, so he would be back. But most of us don't have that feeling very strongly. We're still quite strongly attached to existence. There's one of the ashravas, isn't it? Bhavashra, the taint of attachment to existence. You want to be something. That's, we're all motivated to be something that you can identify yourself with. But yes, if you really investigate very deeply the true nature of this life and the possibilities within this life, you realize that aside from doing what you can to help others, there's nothing in it for you. And that, if you could, you would transcend it. But if you see if you're responding to the sufferings of others, you'll do your best to help them. But yes, I think that most of us are still quite enamoured of life, quite intoxicated with life, if you like. It still holds possibility for us. Of course it does. It's not that you won't get happiness, but it just cannot be enduring. And you cannot escape the underlying feeling, it's not going to work. But we're still sort of carry on. Don't worry that as you develop yourself, you get a stronger and stronger feeling of transcendence and a less and less of an attachment. Because without that feeling of a transcendence, the sense of the futility of human existence is merely depression. There has to be something more.
Yeah, so maybe could you say a bit more about that? Because it does really sound like what you need is a lot of dukkha, a lot of dissatisfaction, but also a lot of faith.
Yeah. Well, so dukkha is usually translated as suffering, but it includes this more a deeper mental suffering of lack of fulfillment. There has to be more. So when we use the word suffering, we need to be careful of that. Yes, that the what drives one ultimately is the sense that it just can't work. Yeah. Yeah. So you said a little bit more, and
So how do we? I get how we sort of can develop more and more of that.
Yeah.
How do we develop more and more faith as well, so that we don't just get depressed?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is quite difficult because many people nowadays are quite nihilistic and don't have a strong sense of something other. It's one of the things that really impresses me working in India and in Mexico. Even though there are many problems in those cultures, people do have a capacity to revere. What I find in my own culture is a great deal of cynicism and nihilism. And that means one has to do quite a bit of work to gain more confidence. And you get that partly by just practicing, by especially doing the metta bhavana. You get it by contact with the Dhamma, studying the Dhamma, so that you're in contact with a teaching which comes from a mind that is supremely enlightened, and contact with people who've got faith. It's said to be one of the things to do is to make contact with people who've got faith. Not a foolish faith, it's all going to be all right, but people who've genuinely got a sense of something more. And that's what we try to provide in a centre like this, Kalyana Mitrata, so that you're in contact with people who really do believe in this, who really do believe that this is true, and who are not chasing after the world. Well, a little bit, they're chasing after the world, but it's not their primary motivation. So I think that, especially in this culture, people come from different cultures, but the main tone of culture in England is cynical and nihilistic, at least for those who've not got a religious perspective. And you really need to make sure you have contact with people who are confident. Yeah. It's contagious.
Yeah, so more development of faith is just important, because I think that's the thing as well. I forget exactly where this quote is from. It might have been the Prajnaparamita Suttas or something like that, but it says he who sees this world as a trap is not fit for full enlightenment. And it's a sort of mind training, I guess, to not just cultivate aversion to the world, but break into compassion instead. Could you say more about how the Bodhisattva ideal sort of relates to this area?
I'm sorry, I said you'd asked me a question, and I've got further comments to make about it, previous ones, so remind me later about that one. But I think the word faith, of course, is a tainted word in our vocabulary. It's so much to do with believing something you can't know. But faith is a capacity to respond to what is of value, if you see what I mean. It's a natural capacity that's part of our human existence. It's a faculty that we have. I think it's very important to identify that faculty and to see it in operation. You know, for instance, you respond to, you know, somebody doing a heroic deed.
Mm-hmm.
You see somebody, you know, really sacrificing themselves. I often give the example, there was a plane crash in the Potomac in Washington, and the report was of a man who was in the plane, kept diving back to bring people out, and eventually didn't come back. But you know, that when you hear of that, you feel something. There's a response from you, a natural response to heroism. Mm-hmm. You don't just say, silly idiot. Mm. You think this is something noble. I think this natural capacity is with everybody, even if it's dampened. And then you see it in your response to friends. You know, in love, even, I mean love in the broadest sense of wanting their well-being, looking at their good qualities. You respond to them. You couldn't talk to another person without faith, in that broadest sense. It's this capacity to respond, which is innate and natural. Art, I think, is one of the ways in which we experience it. Somebody doesn't have to tell you, oh, that's beautiful, and then you think, oh, that's beautiful. You respond. It appeals to you, it strongly strikes you. You can sometimes get that sense. You go to a gallery or something like that and you look at a painting, it kind of comes out and it grabs you and pulls you into it. Mm-hmm. So faith is not an artificial faculty. It's a natural faculty that we all have. And so you cultivate it, just as you would any other faculty. You give it objects to respond to. You train it, if you like, just as you would any other faculty. You train your brain by learning, by mental exercises and so forth. So you need to train your faith, so that in this broader sense, the capacity to respond to value. It's extremely important, value or virtue. Whenever you see it, a natural human response is to admire, to look up to, revere. But one has to be careful where one does that, because people laugh at you or whatever. So you need to associate with people who value that responsiveness. So I think that in the end, it's a question of noticing your capacity to respond to value, and working with that and drawing it out further and further. And I think especially associating with those for whom that faculty is alive. I was very fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with Bhante, and worked. I was his secretary for a while, and his total conviction in the Dhamma, which was very clearly on the basis of his experience, was really contagious, and his capacity to respond to people, as I've said, an amazing range of people, huge range with such a variety of personalities and so forth. He could respond to so many, and capacity to respond to beauty, especially in art, in poetry. I was very fortunate. I went to the Musée Cluny in Paris, which is a wonderful museum of medieval art. We went into a room with lots and lots of showcases full of ivory plaques. And do you know the feeling you get when you go to a museum with loads and loads of stuff in it? You're wondering where the tea room is. But he walked into it and he started sort of looking at something, so I naturally went and looked at it. So look at the way that shape interacts with this shape. And suddenly the thing came to life. So his capacity to respond to beauty communicated to me. So it's very important to recognise in yourself this capacity to respond. There's nobody without it, unless even the most cynical of people, in a way, is their cynicism is in relation to their capacity to respond. They're disappointed.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of my own private preceptor Vajratara. She went through a phase a couple of years ago where she was looking at stream entry, which is this sort of point where the gravitational pull of enlightenment becomes stronger than the gravitational pull of the unenlightened mind. And the way that she got into describing it was that the three jewels, the Buddhist ideals, just become so beautiful that you just turn more and more fully towards that and are drawn more and more into that beauty. And I just love that because it's a sort of turning towards and an image of beauty, really. I wanted to ask you just to say a little bit more about the Bodhisattva ideal and how this can help us, I guess, in this sort of question, this vision of doing the biggest possible thing with our lives, maybe over lifetimes. Do you want a bit more of a prompt than that, or do you want to?
Well, obviously the major issue we have to overcome is our attachment to identity, to me. And one of the great problems in spiritual life is that you try to overcome that attachment to me by a me-ful effort, if you see what I mean, so that you can be then very proud of your spiritual development. And, I can meditate for so many hours, and I've had this experience and that experience. Sometimes you hear it. It's quite unpleasant. And sometimes you hear people talking about their experience. I don't doubt they've had that experience, but there's some way in which it's talked about which is so appropriative, it denies the very meaning of the experience itself. So it's there's a circularity. How do we escape that circularity? And Bhante Sangharakshita describes his own engagement with that when he'd just been ordained as a monk. And he became kind of fascinated, or not fascinated, not tortured, but engaged with the question of overcoming self-attachment and the impossibility of doing so, or the paradox of doing so by self-generated will. And he read a book by a very well-known Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, who actually began to engage with Buddhism and indeed engaged with Chaturasanga Dorje, one of Sangharakshita's teachers. And he said the way in which you overcome that self-attachment is by giving up your individual will to your teacher. So he decided he'd do that with his teacher. His own teacher at that time just kept on consulting him and asking him what he should do. So that didn't quite work. But he then engaged in practices that derive from the Vajrayana tradition, where you visualize a Buddha or Bodhisattva who's the imaginative embodiment of transcendent qualities. And he said that from that moment, his whole spiritual life was guided from that dimension. So you give yourself up to something that goes beyond yourself. And that in terms of in the vertical terms, you give yourself up to something that goes beyond yourself. But in more horizontal terms, you serve some greater purpose. You serve others through that greater purpose. That for me has been extremely important. It is serving the Dhamma, serving my teacher, serving the order. I'm not saying very successful at it, but that is the way in which you try to overcome your natural selfishness. That's what we're talking about. So the Bodhisattva ideal is a whole structure of image and theory and so forth that is all about shifting the attention away from me to what is higher than me and what is beyond me. So that you live for the sake of those. And according to research, more recent research on happiness, there's a lot of research on hedonics. It's said that one of the predictors of happiness is that people feel they are serving something greater than themselves, and also that they are helping other people. So that the experience is one of transcendence through those media.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bodhisattva ideal is quite elaborate system that developed as a corrective to earlier trends.
Mm-hmm.
But really that's what it comes down to, is dedicating yourself to transcending yourself through benefiting others and serving something greater than yourself, a consciousness, a mind greater than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this vision of growth, not just for our own sake, but to become
Yeah.
forces of good in the world.
Yeah. Because as soon as you become concerned with your own growth, you're not going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
You may become quite skilled at meditation, you may become very, your understanding of the Dhamma may be very considerable, but it's just going to circle round on itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so there has to be something bigger. And one of the problems we're up against is one of the views we're up against is what we call the individualistic view.
Mm-hmm.
The view it's all about me. And culture is all about my pleasure, my happiness, my success. And that is not a recipe for happiness. One of the things we're seeing is often Buddhism is appropriated for individualistic purposes, so that even mindfulness, which is a Buddhist practice, a very profound Buddhist practice, becomes a means of adjustment, if you see what I mean. It's okay, better that people adjust than that they don't, but there's more to it than that. So we have to fight against the natural individualism that goes with our times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's such a strong force, isn't it? Like to make spiritual growth about my personal liberation, my personal happiness.
Yeah. My enlightenment, my insight.
Yeah. Even my next life or whatever it is. And it's so important to have something to bend the bamboo the other way. You always emphasize the importance of good conditions in order for us to be able to take part in this sort of work. And was it you who coined the new society?
No, that's Bhante.
Could you say a little bit about that and how it creates the conditions for us to be able to practice?
Well, how it creates them. In a way the question is circular, isn't it? Because it creates the conditions under which it's easiest for us to grow. So there are a number of features of that. First of all, with others who share your aspiration. That's extremely important. I think everybody will experience that on retreat, as I was saying the other day. When you're on retreat with others who are trying to do the same as you, even if it's only temporarily for their first time or whatever, there's a kind of a wave that's carrying you. Amazing how much easier it is to meditate under those circumstances. But then we have to live. So you need somewhere to live. So you want to do the best you can to live with or around or in regular contact with those who share your aspiration. If you possibly can, to work with others who share your aspiration. That's why we have the Mandala Cafe and Jambala and so forth. We try to provide circumstances for ourselves and each other to support us in our spiritual efforts. So the new society idea, it's a little bit out of fashion, but it's basically the idea of trying to set up a little world within the world that is much more supportive of people's spiritual efforts and growth.
And in a sense, that's what we're doing at the LBC.
Well, I certainly hope so. No, it is, yeah, definitely. We could do it much more vigorously and more successfully. But that's what we try to do here. It's not just teach people practices. We try to put them in contact with others who are aspiring. And we try to encourage as many as possible to live and work together, or at least to have a lot of contact with each other.
And then reach out as well with these public classes and things to anyone who might want to join in. Okay, well, I'm going to sort of bring us a little bit more towards a close. So I would just love to hear for you, Subhuti, who've lived a life of service, so dedicated to the Buddhist vision. What has allowed you to stay in touch with vision?
allowed, that's an interesting term.
Maybe enable.
Yeah. I think I've been extremely fortunate. Extremely fortunate to have come into contact with Sangharakshita, who's an extremely gifted teacher with a very deep understanding of what is needed for the spiritual life. So I'd like to think it was my past karma, but I tend to think it was just my raw luck. I happened to live at a time when he was around, and when there was also considerable cultural watershed, Bob Dylan and all that, so I never really bought into conventional life. I consciously checked out of it and never bought into it. So I think that I'm very fortunate in that. Yes, the fact that I have formed very close friendships with people, some of which are very much alive for me today. David Mitra is sitting over there, that have sustained me in my efforts. I think friendship in the end is the be all and end all. It's extremely difficult on your own, I'd say, from my own experience. So having friends who share your commitment is absolutely vital.
So maybe that just end note is a bit of a teaser trailer for the next couple days. Tomorrow Sankadaran will be interviewing Subhuti on practice. So what do we actually do to live out this vision? And Thomas on Wednesday will be talking to you about community. So maybe that's where friendship will come more to the fore as well. But for now I just want to say a big thank you, Subhuti.
Thank you.
And if we could just have a round of applause for Subhuti.
Thank you for some very pertinent and searching questions.
Thank you very much to both of you. And we'll be having the Dharma Night class here starting in about a quarter of an hour. So
get out.
You could just leave your mats and buttons where they are. That'd be fine. And do join us again. Thank you.
Well done. You happy?
I hope that was okay. Yeah, I didn't do any of my notes in the end, but
No, better not.
We hit the hot topics.
Better just to follow your own interests. Yeah.